we get stories about people who have come into Africa and studied. He was a young boy fleeing from Herod who was trying to murder him. And they said the young boy Jesus fled into Egypt to avoid his death. And then when he came back out of Egypt, he was talking real revolutionary, calling the Jews liars, said, you are liars and the father of a lie. You are not the chosen people of God. Why did he say that? Because he'd gone into Egypt and learned that the Jews had learned this whole concept of religion right there in Egypt. And he was an Egyptian scribe himself. And so he came out doing what the Egyptians, of course, this is not him. I want to make that clear. This is not him. I mean, the brother, here you got these black priests, right? And so if the CIA or the Roman Legion, if you prefer, are looking for him and they want to find this brother, he can't hide as a white, blind, blue-eyed white person in the midst of all these shaven-head black priests that I've been showing you that the Romans painted. The Romans painted the priests as black. So how can he be this color and run in there and hide amongst these priests from the Romans? The Romans were in control of the land at the time. It was just like today, a criminal can go into the Vatican for sanctuary and isolation, and the government of Rome can't do anything about it because the Vatican is its own state. So the one place that the Romans would not go into was the temples, because it would irritate and could cause problems with the masses of the people if they desecrated the temples. It's the one place that he could go. Move on. So another man you may have remembered called Moses, but you would think that this was a passage right out of the Bible, but this comes from the 4th dynasty of one of the magicians called Jeddah monk for the Pharaoh Khufu. And look what he does. Let me just set the situation up. There were some sisters doing a dance, and one of them had lost a turquoise necklace into the water. And she became sad and stopped dancing. The Pharaoh said, what is the problem? I lost my necklace. He called on his priest and said, what can you do about it? Here, pick it up from there. Then said the chief lector, Jeddah monk, his magic sayings, he placed one side of the water of the lake upon the other, and lying upon the parts that he found a fish-shaped charm. Then he brought it back and gave it to his owner. Now as for the water, it was 12 cubits deep, and it amounted to 24 cubits after it was folded back. He said his magic sayings, and he brought back the water of the lake to its position. So here's a priest in Egypt under the Pharaoh Khufu, 2,700 years BC, 4,700 years ago, parting water, long before Abraham, long before Moses, long before all those people who came in there and learned how to part some water. So here you got Jesus walking on water, Moses parting the water. The Bible clearly saying he studied for 40 years in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. You got Charleston Heston and Edmund G. Robinson standing over here at Universal Studios. Gonna part the Red Sea. Now we see where he learned how to part that Red Sea from, don't you? So the Egyptians were the masters of water. They saw their entire existence bordered and hinged on the concept of water. The water that the woman gave birth to the child, the inundation process began as the child came bellowing out of her interior. The concept of the water as they would sail up and down the highways doing commerce, in the south, commerce in the north. And when they died and went to heaven, the boat to take them back to the interior of Africa. And later as they became gods in a bark, they would travel across the heavens in a boat. So if anybody on the face of the earth could make the trip to America, we know it was the Egyptians. Nothing could stop the Egyptians. So Thor Heyerdahl, European, he knew that. And so what he did, he looked at these boats, these Egyptian vessels, and he chose the most primitive type, the papyrus reed, and said, I'm going to prove that the ancient Egyptians could sail to America. This was his calling. This is what he wanted to do. So you can see he looked at the brothers, clearly see that they were brothers, and didn't look anything like him. And so what he did is he said, okay, they don't look like me, let me go find some people who look like them. So he went to Chad in the interior of Africa, and he found some brothers who looked just like the brothers on the boats, who were making the same kinds of boats, and he brought these brothers back to Egypt and built a boat right in front of the pyramids in Egypt. Why didn't we get this in class? Did anyone teach us this in class? At the university, at the high school, at the junior college, at the elementary school, at the preschool, in the home. Nobody taught us this. So so in case you think I'm just jiving you, here's the pyramid and the boat in front of it. where they built the boat based on the Egyptian Canaan right in front of the pyramids in Egypt. Heyerdahl understood that the reason that white folks couldn't get across to America and they thought the world was flat is that they were traveling against the currents. And that if you travel along the currents of West Africa, the currents would bring you right to America. Anything that was able to stay afloat would come naturally to America. A bottle, a person, anything that could stay afloat would naturally come to America. He knew that. So he knew that white folks, in fact, had not discovered the whole world. As you see them here teaching their little kids that we discovered this, here it is, big finger right here on America. We discovered it. No brothers in sight. Got Magellan and Columbus and De Leon, and now they're discovering the universe. For the Europeans. But the Dogon, as Brother Simi and Brother and Sister Alma have been to the Dogon land, they've already been out in the universe. That's a long story. We won't get into that one. We'll let you look at that brother's lecture. We move on. So the white folks thought the world was flat. And you can see here, it's not Brother Mathu making this up. In 1492, their science was in such a state that they believed that the world was flat and that if you sailed off into the Atlantic, you'd fall off the edge of the earth or be devoured by some hideous monster. This was the extent of their science at this particular time in the year 1492. But what made the Europeans want to navigate in 1492? All of a sudden you have Spain, the nation again like Greece, closest to Africa, sponsoring a navigational trip, an expedition to America. They don't teach us about the Moorish occupation that took place. For over 700 years the Moors had controlled that particular land and brought about a renaissance, which they called the Renaissance. The Moors were there to the year 1492, the very year that Columbus set sail. Queen Isabella and Ferdinand expelled the Moors out of Spain. The same year he launched his ships to America. All over the East, they knew about Africans and their navigation. They had talked about Abubakar II and how he had sent 400 ships across the Atlantic to see what was across the Atlantic. In fact, not only did he send 400, but he got in the ship and sailed himself. We know this from a Moroccan historian who wrote about this in Cairo. This is the year 1310. Not 1492. So Columbus, or Colon, a Jewish background, who were Jewish merchants selling throughout the Mediterranean, they got a hold of some of these stories. We know that this is what happened. This is why he got so interested in going to America to find this land which they called Atlantis in ancient times. So Heyerdahl knew this. So Heyerdahl took the same route that Columbus had learned about from the Moors. And the Moors had learned about from translating the Egyptian and the Greek and Egyptian texts about navigation. They knew the world was round long before the Greeks knew the world was round, long before the Europeans knew the world was round. In Kemet, we knew the world was round. Imhotep knew the world was round. So here you can see Heyerdahl mapping out his course, how he was going to come to America. Got in his boat just like he saw in the Kemetic museums, and he sailed to America. Not once, but twice, in Ra 1 and Ra 2. And he said at this particular point, whenever one considers who populated and who brought the first high culture to America, they would not be able to leave out the Egyptians because of his navigational experiences. That's important. So then we look at the reason for navigating. Why would the Egyptians want to navigate across the Atlantic? And again, if we go back to the Bible, maybe we'll find the answer here. As we can see, you take this one off here. As we can see here, Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. We see here in the Bible where Moses has married a black woman, Ethos being burnt and Opes being faced, the black-faced one. Moses has in fact married her. This is a fact. Now we're talking about a time when he was supposed to have a confrontation with a man named Ramesses. The 19th dynastic period, approximately 1200 or so years BC.